All right, so I'm going to start recording. Great. So welcome to our RFP review for round 13 of our textbook transformation grants. We did our pilot project back in 2014. It is now 2018. Time has flown. Thank you so much for coming. Now, some of you might be familiar with what Affordable Learning Georgia is and what textbook transformation grants are. I see Kathy Hakes in here. Hello, Kathy. You know all about this part. But Affordable Learning Georgia is an initiative of the USG. It is a way to provide the time that it takes to create, to adopt, and to adapt open educational resources and other free resources such as library subscribed resources, which are free to students, and also lower cost resources below the $40 mark in the classroom. Affordable Learning Georgia is more than just the grants, of course. We have advocates at each institution. Sometimes they're helping with grants. Sometimes they're really getting the word out about OER and open textbooks. Sometimes they are working with publishers to get really low-cost options on their campus. ALG is kind of multifaceted in that way. But one of our biggest points is our textbook transformation grants. So why do we do grants? Well, we are funding the time it takes to get the work done. So if you're a faculty member or an instructional designer, you know how tough a task it can be to redesign a course, especially if you're moving away from the commercial model, which often provides you with a bunch of resources in order to get you to buy into the textbook that students then have to purchase on their own. When you're going to OER, you're able to make your own version of the resource for sure, but that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It may take peer review if you really want to get this stuff vetted. It might take some partners in the library to find a whole bunch of resources to bring them together. It might take some design work from a graphic designer, an instructional designer. It might take a project manager if it's a big enough task. So that's what these textbook transformation grants are all about. Funding the time to get really meaningful work done that then gets shared with the public, and they are able to then make new versions of those resources, make them their own. We started out with really big standard grants. They were a maximum of $10,800. There was only one form of that when we started out. We now have a bigger one for departments, and we have mini grants for people who want to create new ancillary materials or revise OER. Now, a big asterisk, one of the biggest ones, is that how this time is funded varies by your institution. We have a contract with your institution for that work to get done, for that team to do the work, but how the institution funds that, it depends on the institution itself. So we have all kinds of different rules and regulations within different institutions, but every institution has seen at least one textbook transformation grant. There should be a contact in your research office or business office that should be able to answer your questions. And if they have any questions, they can come to me and we can talk it out. So this request for proposals for round 13, the deadline is in January, so you have quite a bit of time to get the application part done. You can even mull it over the holiday and kind of finalize it when you get back. After the deadline, peer reviews start immediately. We assign them on January 15th, and they go until January 28th of 2019. After that, there is a small administrative review part of it. We take the peer reviews into heavy consideration. They are the biggest criteria for selection, but there are some cases where maybe a peer reviewer had a completely broken application or they mistook a letter for something. You never know what happens. So we need to make sure that on the administrative end that we are also awarding the most impactful projects. So the peer reviewers are the most important part of the application process. And then after that, we make sure that what we're accepting is an impactful project and a nice feasible one too. And you'll see that through the rubric that the peer reviewers are going to be using, which is different this time around if you did not see the new rubric in round 12. February 25th is the kickoff meeting. If you have a standard or a large scale grant, not a mini grant, then you'll have at least 2 team members participating in this kickoff meeting. We usually suggest that at least the project lead attends, but if you have a large group and you're a pro at OER, you've been to ALG events before, you may have been to a kickoff meeting before, then you'd probably want to send 2 people who are not used to it in order for them to further understand OER, copyright, accessibility, etc. So be sure to have these dates ready if you are going to apply. They are on the request for proposals, so that works out pretty well. It's right there for you. But have these handy because if you're accepted, if the notification goes out, you've got a little less than a month to get the kickoff meeting travel ready over to Middle Georgia State University. So I talked a little bit about this before, but there are a couple of funding levels. If you're doing a standard scale transformation, this is a smaller group that is transforming their course from being dependent on a commercial resource to being an open educational resources based course, a library resources based course, a no cost, low cost resources course. This usually affects under 500 students, but there are exceptions to that. The maximum award is $10,800. The maximum per team member is $5,000. That doesn't mean that there has to be 2 team members at $5,000. You can have a larger team with smaller amounts of funding if you would like. And then $800 for travel and overall project expenses. Now that $800 has to be part of the application. We need to make sure that you're able to attend the kickoff meeting. We need to make sure that everybody gets together, that we're on the same page, that we're all sharing our ideas at least once before we really get started on these projects. So that's why the $800 is a required part of the budget. Not everybody is going to use that complete $800 to go to the kickoff meeting. That's why we say and overall project expenses. Let's say you needed to purchase some software or something like that. Within state and board and institutional guidelines, that $800 is pretty flexible. Especially if you're at Middle Georgia, you probably don't need $800 to travel to Middle Georgia State University. A large-scale transformation is quite a bit like a standard-scale transformation, but it allows for larger teams for a big implementation, a department-wide one, a supersection one. Those involve a lot of different meetings. They involve getting teaching assistants on board. They're at a larger scale and therefore demand a larger amount of time, which then demands a larger amount of funding. So the maximum award for this is $30,000, not $30,800. So you do have to work out the math on this a bit. It's $5,000 maximum per team member, and again, that doesn't have to be equal across the board depending on what the team member is doing. It doesn't have to be exactly $5,000. This is a maximum amount. And then there's $800 required part of the budget for travel and overall project expenses. This is a little bit harder to work out mathematically, but not too bad. I mean, we are in college after all. So this is a required part of the budget. This again is only for at least 2 team members. So if you're going, wait a minute, we only have $800 to send 7 people from Valdosta to Macon. Well, that's not exactly the case. We are making sure that at least 2 team members attend. If you have a very large team, it's still 2 that are required. Then we have our mini grants. Mini grants are very different. They're not geared toward textbook transformation, although they are transforming OER in a way. They are trying to fund a small amount of time that it might take to revise a textbook, to create new ancillary resources around new open textbooks that exist out there already, to create new video series and narrated lecture slides and create kind of accessible modules, that type of thing where you have an idea but you just can't get it off the ground without a little bit of time. That's what these mini grants are all about. Because of these, we now have a third edition of an open textbook that was created by a small grant team all the way back in round 2. And now we have some OpenStax ancillary materials that we then let OpenStax know about, and then they let their OpenStax users know about them too. It's it's a very sharing culture when it comes to open educational resources. So here, there's a 4,800 maximum award. We are not requiring mini grantees to come to the kickoff meeting. So much of it is about the kind of procedures and the fundamentals that a mini grantee should already know about if they're already working with OER. But if you would like to attend, you totally can. The 800 there is not required, but you can use it for overall project expenses. I mean, we know that when we're creating new materials that sometimes they have a cost in terms of software platforms or hardware. So that 800 can be used for those types of things. The maximum per team member is $2,000. So this could be at maximum 2 people on a team for $2,000, but you can spread this out as much as you need to. And again, this is largely a contract with your institution. The institution and you can be flexible on how this works out. There are some priority categories. Those categories are, and if you have a chat message, feel free to type it in and I will see it as soon as it pops up too. So these categories are not requirements. There's a federal grant program out there right now that was going to do 1, 2, 3 grants, and they have this priority category, and it's almost like you would have to do it in order to get a grant because they're not awarding too many grants. That's not the case with our textbook transformation grants. We would really like these following priority category these categories to be fulfilled for sure, but they are not the only ones that are awarded grants. If your project does not meet these priority categories, still definitely apply. It's not like your chances are low if that happens. The most important thing is that you have a really good peer-reviewed application. So the first one is specific core curriculum courses. So ALG is really trying to get an implementation of OER in every core curriculum course that we can. Some of these have already been done in eCore, and a lot of these have already been done in textbook transformation grants. So those we don't necessarily need to look at anymore. But there are some that haven't been covered yet. And you know that the core curriculum list is pretty big. Now these don't fit the institutional options category because those by their nature are institutional and may not scale very well statewide. But the ones that are on the list throughout the state that haven't been covered are these, and they are in the RFP as a table. And you can see that some of these are going to be tough to do. There's elementary Greek and elementary Italian. Those don't necessarily affect a huge scale, but they are critical as they are foreign languages that are within the core curriculum. So it's kind of tough to work some of these out. But some of these are pretty common courses. For example, British Literature 1 and 2. Introduction to Ethics is a huge one that we haven't really seen anything in. Physical Science 1 is kind of a different variant on some other courses that we have seen, but not quite the same. Some of you know what Physical Science 1 is as opposed to Introduction to Physics or Principles of Physics. It's a little different. Principles of Accounting 1 and 2, there is some good OER out there for accounting at the moment. Some of these are tougher because the resources are newer, like Survey of Western Civilization 3. That's very modern history. Same with World History 3. So some of these are tough because the resources are new. Some of these are tough because there really aren't that many courses with a lot of students in them out there. Another priority category is the Gateways to Completion courses. If you are in a Gateways to Completion course, you already know that you're in a Gateways to Completion course, most likely. These are very specific projects that are taking place at specific institutions. These courses are seen as very critical to completion within student transcripts over the years. It's been like a data analysis type of thing. So if you are already in that project, we can also fund the time it takes to make that Gateway to Completion course revision an OER course revision. So it's extra work, but we are funding that extra work. And then scaling up OER, we really don't want to dismiss the smaller projects that have gotten a really good implementation of OER in their courses, want to take it to a department level, but finds that they would need to do a whole bunch of extra work in order to get that done. We wouldn't want to just say, well, you've already had a grant project before in this course, so therefore we can't help you with this very unique idea. So this is a grant type that allows people who have done previous grants to scale up their projects to a much higher level, to department-wide, all sections. Funding for this category is exactly identical to large-scale textbook transformation grants, but what we're saying here is that we are welcoming return grantees who want to bring their OER implementation to a larger scale. And then the mini grants are for OER revisions and ancillary materials creation. Unlike the others where a final deliverable is the final report and any materials that were created under the grant, here it's the materials that were created under the grant and a very small final report. It's a little narrative description one, much less detail than you have to do with a bigger textbook transformation grant that talks about pedagogical revision, that kind of thing. And any of the newly created materials, by default, they are going to be on our Creative Commons Attribution License, or CC BY. If you do not know about these licenses, please go to creativecommons.org, and you can hear me typing this into the chat at the same time, and learn a little bit about how Creative Commons licenses work. They give permissions on top of your usual copyright whenever you create something within the US, and these permissions allow people to revise or remix, but they will have to attribute the original back to you. Now, if you already are working with an open educational resource that has a Creative Commons license that isn't CC BY, but you need to share it under the same, or you need to share it under a non-commercial license, you can do that. That's the exception. But if you're creating something new, a new ancillary material, something like that, those are by default going to be CC BY. A quick change that happens in the mini grants, in fact, it happened today in order to clarify this, because the application page was the new one, the clear one, but the RFP had a little bit of outdated wording in the description of mini grants. It's not creating ancillary materials or revisions for ALG funded OER, it's for any existing OER. So you can create ancillary materials for an OpenStax textbook, for instance, not just the materials that were created out of Affordable Learning Georgia projects. Of course, the materials you create are now Affordable Learning Georgia projects. We would be sharing them out of our repository. So that's a new change. Everything's up to date on the website and in the RFP page with this, but it is a very new change that is meant to clarify what falls under these mini grant projects. And just a little bit about definitions. Revisions aren't just fixing some spelling errors and tweaking the margins a bit. It is a major adaptation or improvement. We often just call them additions, but addition has a very textbook connotation to it. And sometimes what we are doing when we're revising is we're revising things like videos and stuff like that. Those might be a very different kind of revision, but we're looking for substantial work to get done on these. Ancillary materials are any materials that are supporting the instruction of a course using existing OER. So if you need some accessible narrated lectures that you're going to put into D2L for an online course, we can also share those through our repository. They would be under a CC BY license at that point. We had someone create an entire video series for anatomy and physiology, and they are describing and showing different parts of the body through different 3D models. That's the kind of ancillary materials that we're talking about, stuff that makes everybody's job a little easier when they think that they need to adapt some OER and they just don't have enough supporting materials behind them. This is the stuff that would really help. Now, funding works through a contract between the system office and an institution. It's called a service level agreement. Everyone's seen a service level agreement when it comes to the institutional business offices. This takes your proposal, which you are submitting through the application process, and makes it the statement of work. This is the stuff that's going to get done with a deadline of your final semester on the project. And so that's done through a contract, and then we fund that contract. And it's a 50-50% funding. At one point, we used to just do one invoice, and we would just pay 50% on the invoice and 50% on the invoice later. But now we have to do it one invoice for 50% at the beginning, one invoice for 50% once you submit the final report. This ensures accountability on our part and on your part. It's pretty commonplace within the system office to do a 50-50 funding. And your institutional sponsors will be responsible for the fund disbursement. You may be working with a department head on that, and maybe they're coordinating with the business office. You may be coordinating with the business office directly. It really depends on your team. But just know that when you're using these funds, they are state funds. They have to comply with state Board of Regents and institutional policies. If you are working with a business or research office, which you basically have to, they will help you on this. For example, state funds can't pay directly for food. So I can't host a workshop and buy everybody a whole bunch of food to come to the workshop because state funds can't be used for that. You have to look for other sources for that kind of thing to happen. Just that, food is the usual meeting state guidelines example, but there are other ones that your business office and research office will know about. I'm definitely not the expert on that. So the required proposal elements when you want to submit a proposal. For mini grants, it is the Google form linked in the request for proposals. That is all of it. You don't have to then go into InfoReady Review and submit another textbook transformation grants proposal. If you do, we have to go in and make sure we find out which one is the real one and delete the one that isn't. That would just be me contacting you and hopefully working that out. But for mini grants, the Google form link is in the RFP. For standard scale and large scale, you'll need to complete the proposal application in InfoReady Review. That's our platform for applying. You'll need to have a letter of support that you are uploading in InfoReady Review, and that is from your sponsoring area. Basically, a level above where you are that says we support this, and they'll be responsible for the receipt and distribution of funding. This is especially so we don't fund a project and then suddenly hear from your department head, hey, I didn't hear about this, I don't want this to happen. That would be a really big problem on everybody's part. So we want to make sure that you have a letter of support that documents the support for this project at your institution. Now, if you have a multi-institutional team, which doesn't always happen, but I suggest it to a lot of people who submit a proposal and it's for a very small class to kind of collaborate across institutions. If you do that, you need letters of support from each institution sponsoring area. I can't tell someone at Georgia State, well, this project has a letter of support from Clayton State, so obviously you supported it. We want to make sure that we have letters from each institution. And if you have letters from each institution or multiple, just put them in one PDF because there's only one bucket for the file. Now, peer reviewers, we select every single time. We don't have just a small peer review committee. We select 10 or more peer reviewers each time that we have a round. They're a different group for each round. We select them based on their experience with open educational resources and their experience with grant reviewing. Sometimes we do either or, so we bring some new people to open educational resources that have done a lot of grant reviewing, or we bring people who know OER like the back of their hand, but they've never reviewed grants before. Usually we have people who do both because we have a pretty big turnout for that. They work with Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech provides the platform InfoReady review, and they deal with the honoraria part of it too. And yeah, we are evaluating based on a list of different characteristics that I will show you in the rubric. And that'll be a little later on. So for mini grants, I'm going to show you the application form now. So what I'm going to do is present my desktop. Primary monitor, there we go. For a second here, you're going to see kind of a Skypeception. I'm looking at Skype at the moment, but what I want to do is bring up the mini grant review. So I'll go here to the mini grant application, and I'll just do a preview. Here we go. So we have a description of what the mini grants are right here. And then this isn't going to be as heavily involved as the bigger standard and large-scale grant applications. So you need your name, your position, institution, email address, other team members, your project, final semester of the project, grant funding amount, the resources to be created, the project description, timeline and personnel, and budget. So these are going to be bigger answers. It looks like they're just single line, but this takes a lot of text in here. And so then there is a thing that says that you do agree that by default, these are going to be CC BY with exceptions for more restrictive licenses. So all of the stuff to fill this out is in the RFP. All of the details are there. This is a little bit more open-ended when it comes to the form than it is for the InfoReady review form. That's why it's so easy to run it through. Be sure that you have the right final semester of the project and that it lines up with the timeline. So if you select Fall 2019, there will be a final report and submission of the created materials at the end of Fall 2019. If you select one of these and then you send the materials in 2 semesters beforehand, I can't really do anything with that because the service level agreement goes until the deadline still. It's really tough to go through and then do the amendment to the service level agreements, and it causes some weird paperwork issues down the line sometimes too if that happens. So just be sure that if you click Fall 2019 and you have a timeline and your personnel, your roles, that when you say you're going to be submitting the materials in the final report, that you say it's at the end of the final semester of the project that you selected. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just get back to you through email and then revise it from there. So this is a very quick application. Now, the tough thing about Google Forms, as opposed to InfoReady Review, is that you don't have a PDF button that you can do. But let's say that I type in my name here, and my applicant position is program manager, etc. If I then go to print by just right-clicking and going to print, it will show my answers there. So I would suggest saving your document as a PDF as soon as you filled everything in right before you click submit. Now, if you don't, if you just click submit and you go, oh man, I forgot to save it, email me, because I'll be able to look at your individual response, save it as a PDF, and then send it your way. But the easiest way, the most direct way to do it, is to answer everything here, right-click, hit print, and save it as a PDF. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, there we are. I'm going back into the PowerPoint. And it is taking a little while there. Sorry about that. And now I'll just go right back to where we were. Okay, sorry about that. We just had a little bit of freezing going on there. When it comes to the standard and large-scale grants, you're going to want to do a couple of things, not just creating the online form and then just sending it in. First, you want to go to this website, which is the RFP for round 13. Be sure that this is on your radar because this site is going to have all of the supporting documentation that you need. When you complete that proposal, hey, where are you going? Once you complete the Word document proposal, save that for yourself in case you need to refer to it later, and also you're going to need that when you walk through InfoReady Review. So you fill out the Word document first. You've got all the answers on there. There's some guiding text on that offline document, and it's not in the InfoReady Review one, so be sure to fill that out first. After that, you'll be going to the InfoReady Review site. This is a link right on the RFP to the online application. The first thing you'll want to do there is create an account. So it's at the top right part of the page. You just click on Login. Now, everything's going to look a little bit outdated here because I don't have enough email addresses to constantly get a demo for this part. So it looks a little different now. But this part looks the same. This login for other users, you just click on Register below it. Above it, there's a login for Georgia Tech users if you're at Georgia Tech. But other than being at Georgia Tech, you have to click on this login for other users. Registering doesn't take much of anything. You just put in your first name, last name, email address, and the password you want. You enter you do the reCAPTCHA just to prove you're not a robot. I think now you just click on a checkbox and it checks it that way, and then you click Create Account. Now it'll say InfoReady Review now as opposed to Competition Space, but again, it's because I don't have enough email addresses to continuously update these screenshots here. It'll say that your account's been created. If you're at Georgia Tech, you just click on the Georgia Tech login and it'll know everything right from there. But if not, it'll send that you have registered. It'll say InfoReady Review instead of Competition Space, but it'll show up in your inbox like this from a Georgia Tech account. It'll say someone using this email address created an account. Hopefully that is you. If you created the account, click Confirm Account, so you click that, and then it will be created and confirmed. Now on the front page of InfoReady Review, we are at the bottom. The reason why we're at the bottom is our category is called University System of Georgia. That starts with a U, and that puts us at the bottom of the list. So be sure to scroll down when you first get to the page, and I'll be showing you this as we get there. And just a quick guiding principle: do not use tables whenever you can. InfoReady Review can sometimes put tables in their online application. Sometimes it's fine, but sometimes they completely break your application. They don't even let you submit it. Sometimes it will make you lose information. I had to go in and kind of redo someone's application in round 12 because they had copied a table, and InfoReady Review just didn't like the table. It was very picky. So if you are going to create something in Word on your application, use bulleted lists whenever you can. This may be a little tougher. You might have a couple of tiers of bullets, but it will work so much better in InfoReady Review than if you use a table. So I'm going to take you to the application from here, if it will let me. What I can do is just go right into the RFP instead because Skype decided not to let me do this. Pardon our Skype dust, we are still learning this platform a bit. What I will do now is just show you this through presenting the desktop. There we go. And now we are transitioning at the moment. All right, here we are. So you should be seeing the RFP for round 13, the page on ALG's site. There's the RFP link right here for the PDF, the rubric, the Word version, which you want to fill out first. So we will do that first. And I'll just click on this to make it easier to see. So this is for round 13. I'm going to zoom in a bit here. The applicant and the submitter can be different or can be the same person. If you are applying for this and you're submitting the application and you're going to be the project lead, then the applicant is the submitter. But sometimes there are grants offices, research offices. I've even seen provosts who would like to submit grant proposals on the institution's behalf. So the applicant would be the project lead for the project. The submitter would be whoever it is who's submitting the application at that point. So that's why we separate these out. If you are submitting this on your own, you're the applicant, leave the submitter stuff blank. And that's about it there. We need the name and email address for team members here. You'll want to describe them in their roles later on in the transformation action plan. But here, this is more so that we're able to contact everyone. Should they be accepted, we can add them to the list very easily. And if you have more than 8 team members, which is unlikely, but it does happen, enter their names and email addresses past that point. You need the sponsor's name, title, department, and institution. This is whoever is providing the letter of support. Then there's all the project information and impact data. Don't worry too much about the title of the project. We are going to rename it into a grant number. That is so that we can track this application past the point in which it's even completed as a grant. And then we've got the type of grant, the requested amount of funding, the course names, course numbers. If it's just one, that's totally fine. Final semester of the project, you'll select either fall 2019 or spring 2020. This is when all of your materials are going to be used in the class, and there's going to be a final report at the end of that semester. The average number of students. So these are all of the numbers. They're all averages here, and then there's totals of averages, trying to see the impact of the project as it goes along. So we want students per section, average number of sections, and total number of students affected in one academic year. So you could just multiply these. It depends on what kind of numbers that you have. The average number of students affected per summer, fall, and spring allows us to track at an even more granular level the potential impact of the project from when it starts. This is especially helpful when we have to report these numbers to the legislature. We're trying to be as diligent as possible in getting very detailed data on how this is affecting how this is really affecting costs for students at your institution. The title and the author of the original required materials. So if you have a particular textbook, that's where you'd be putting it here. This is the commercial textbook. The original total cost per student. This could just be the cost of the textbook. If you have a textbook and a lab manual, then you'd be doing that here. The post-project cost per student. So let's say that you are transforming the textbook, but you have to keep the old lab manual, which is like $35 or something like that. Then the cost of that lab manual would be the post-project cost. Or if you have to use a low-cost homework platform, that's where you would be talking about the post-project cost here. So the post-project savings per student is the original total cost of the project minus the post-project cost. Then the projected total student annual savings. This is the total number of students multiplied by the post-project per student savings estimate. This yes or no for using an OpenStax textbook is just an indicator. We used to have it as an entirely different section of grants, and there really wasn't that much of a reason to do so. This just lets us know and lets OpenStax know that you're looking at adopting their textbook, and then they can provide you with even more support and instructor resources. This part's very important because this is where most of the work gets done. The really big sections are in the narrative section. So the project goals are not just the goals of what you're going to do in the project, it's what you really want to achieve. Is it all about student savings? Are you looking to increase student success? Do you already have a lot of student success, but they're paying $300 and you want them to just not do that? That's where these types of project goals are. This is about outcomes of the project. So make sure that you're letting the peer reviewers know beyond we will put an open textbook in our course what you really want to do. The statement of transformation, this is all about, what's the course doing right now? Is it a really crucial one? Are a lot of people failing it? What are your students like? What is the institution like? Why is this unique to your particular circumstances within these courses? That's where this goes. And if you want to cite any resources, this is usually where it goes to. If you want to have a bit of a literature review, that'll go in the statement of transformation. That'll be the how, the what, the why of this project getting done. The transformation action plan is more about who does what and what's going to get done. So this is where you would be talking about people's roles. So for example, you may have 5 assistant and associate professors, and maybe their titles do tell you exactly what they're going to do on the project, but maybe one's going to be a project manager, maybe one's bringing in graphic design, maybe an instructional designer is going to be the instructional designer, or maybe they're going to be the project manager. That's where this stuff goes in, especially if you're going to be creating videos, like who is going to be operating the equipment, who's going to be doing the editing. That stuff goes into the transformation action plan too. If you're providing access to these new materials in places that aren't our repository, that's awesome. Open license materials are great because you can make copies of them and redistribute them. We will be redistributing them through our repository, but we also want to know where else you're going to share them, because that's just really great information to know. And we'll want to know about any work that needs to get done. What kind of redesign work needs to be done for the transformation? Is it just the resources? Is it the curriculum? Is it the accessibility of the materials that you already have? That kind of stuff goes here. Quantitative and qualitative measures are very important too. These are all about how you're going to find out whether or not what you got done had that kind of effect. So we have some standard questions, whether or not there was a significant increase or decrease in student satisfaction, in learning outcomes / student performance. This is usually through grades, but some people measure it differently, and some course level retention. So for example, DFW rates at one institution might be grade D, grade F, and withdraw. For some people, it is drop, fail, and withdraw. It will depend by institution, but you'll want to outline what it is that you're measuring here and how you're going to do it. So each measure that you use, describe it here. Peer reviewers love to hear about your quantitative and qualitative methods. It's very important to be detailed on that. And if you're going to need institutional review board approval, indicate that here too. It doesn't need to be IRB approved when you submit the application, but you'll need to at least outline what you'll need to do for IRB approval. Now the timeline, that is about the major milestones of the project. So you don't have to say that you're going to, write page 1 of this new open textbook for environmental science on this date, and then do pages 3 to 5 on the next date. That's too detailed. But the major milestones for the project, when things are going to be in a first draft, when all of the new materials are going to be implemented in the course, that stuff goes in the timeline, including the final semester of the project with the final report. Make sure that when you say that you're submitting the final report, that it is at the end of the final semester of your project. Because if you say that you're submitting your final report in 2021, that's not even possible. So I'll have to come back and ask you about it. It has happened where we've seen timelines go way further past the grant. That's more about sustainability than it is about the actual grant project happening. It has to end at the end of the semester. The budget, and we've already talked about the budget here, but this will be a little breakdown of how it works. It doesn't have to be incredibly detailed. When it comes to reconfiguring how the budget works a little bit, let's say there's a change in personnel down the line, you don't have to go line by line with me getting these approved. This will be with your institution. You'll just let us know that there's a change in personnel. Be sure not to use a table here because InfoReady Review kind of breaks, especially on budget tables. If you use a bullet point list, that'll be acceptable. Usually people talk about this by person. You know, this amount for this amount for travel. Just make sure that you keep those funding guidelines in mind. The sustainability plan is number 7. We want to make sure that the work that gets done in these grants, if you choose to keep using OER, that you have a plan to keep using it. We hope that you're going to continue to keep your course no cost and affordable. And so things like how you plan on maintaining these materials and maybe updating them down the line, that'll be part of the sustainability plan. If you want to go and share this information with your colleagues, where you would like to present it would be great in the sustainability plan. If you want to create a peer-reviewed article on what you found through these quantitative and qualitative measures, we love that. Please let us know that you're planning on doing that, and peer reviewers will love to hear it. And then there's just a note on the letter of support just to guide you on that of what the letter of support is. We already talked about that though. All right, so now what we're going to do is head back. And what I'll do is go into, nope, that's not it. Part of my dust again. Manage content, there it is. It still did not take me to the slide I wanted to go to, so I'm going to go through this. As I'm going through this, feel free to type in any questions you have into chat. This is a great time to do it. Okay, so now that I've taken you through that part of the online form, if you go to InfoReady Review, it's going to look very similar. And what I'll do is, I'll just show you it through here too. This won't be nearly as much explanation because we've already gone through what all of these mean. But let's say that I sign out of here and I look in here and I want to apply to round 13. I log in. All right. So you see here, there's the institution name, applicant, email address, same kind of stuff that we were doing with the submitter. You would just put your name here if you are also the submitter and the applicant at the same time. The peer review rubric is up here. The application form is up here. You just put in the title, you select the semester, you select the type of grant. All of these you've filled out in Microsoft Word. There are ways to paste from Word. If you use the Paste from Word button, it's pretty great. It still doesn't paste tables very well, but it does at least do it sufficiently when you've got bulleted lists and different types of underlining. It works okay. And then you've got your usual what you see is what you get editor with linking and bold and italics and underlined and such. And this is the sponsor information. Here's the original required commercial materials. That's the title, author, and price. We just want to make sure that we put this box before all of these smaller lines. That's why it's a little out of place. Here's all of the numbers that we talked about before. Here is the goals, transformation. You'll see that there is no italics, no guidelines here. InfoReady Review just doesn't do that. That's why we have that Word document. It's especially important to follow the Word document first and then put your goals and your transformation, your action plan, measures, timeline, budget, and sustainability plan right in here. You'll upload your letter of support right here. You can see that there is only one bucket for the letter of support. So if you have 2 letters of support, just make one PDF out of them and then do this. If you're not able to make one PDF because you don't have a version of Adobe Acrobat that'll let you do it, just put them both in a zip file and you can do that here. The proposal narrative, so if you're filling out this Word version, it's good for you to submit the proposal narrative too. This is a backup copy. Let's say that everything is broken and it's midnight and I've got to fix something. I can look at the Word version and just fix it from here. And of course, I can always send this back to you as a backup copy. Then if you want to add any other email addresses for notifications, you can send them in here. Then you just click the grant acceptance, which is that your application is going to be the statement of work. It's going to be part of that contract, and what you'll see in this acceptance notification is the kind of stuff you'll see in the service level agreement. You've got to make sure that those deliverables are completed in the statement of work, which is your proposal. Once you're done, you click Save as Draft, and you can just save it. Or you click Submit Application to send it my way. Once that's done, you'll see a little button up here that says PDF if you've saved a draft, and you can save a PDF copy of the application, the online application, just to see how it looks before you hit apply, or to keep a physical copy for yourself. So that's all of InfoReady Review. It's going to be great if you already do the Word document. If you didn't already do the Word document, it would be very confusing. So now what I'm going to do is move right back to the PowerPoint. Doing a lot of moving around, sorry about that. It is still loading. My goodness, Skype, you are a Microsoft product loading a Microsoft file. What is going on with you? I'm going to try this again. Okay, I'm going to try to reset this very quickly. There we go. It even went to the right slide this time. Well, that's great. It only took a minute to get that ready. Sorry about that. All right, so you get an email once you've submitted it. It says, we've received your application. It'll let you know that your application was received. That doesn't mean that it's been accepted or approved just yet. The next thing that you'll see is when I click accept. That means I've looked this over to make sure that it's complete and ready for peer review. And then it'll say that it has been reviewed by a competition administrator, has been accepted for review. So if it says it's been accepted, that's not an award notification. That's just saying it is ready for review. I'm going to add reviewers to it. If you send it in early, before like a week before the deadline, I can look at it and send it back to you and decline it. So with my feedback, so that you can fix it before and just resubmit it. But if you're sending it a little too close to the deadline, then I'm accepting it by default, and then the peer reviewers will see what they see at that point. The rubric is far different now than it used to be. It used to just have the sections and a score on them, and that was about it. This time around, we're looking at different aspects of the proposal and really taking a look at kind of overarching themes and then weighing those based on their priority. So the impact it has on student savings is, of course, a big part of the grant process, but the organization of it, the feasibility of the project, who is going to be doing what, that's also a really big part of the project. So both of those have a weight of 3. The qualitative and quantitative measures, the quality of those is important too. So that has a weight of 2, and you can see the descriptions here. The rubric is also on the application page and on the RFP. And then the clarity and alignment, while necessary and important, are not nearly as important as the organization and planning and feasibility. So if somebody's got a slight problem with your budget, but you've got a great plan, the budget is not weighed the exact same as your transformation action plan. That used to be a bit of a problem. The project goals were really important. The timeline was not so important. And how could we, reconcile that? That's what this new rubric is all about. So that is everything. That's a lot. It nearly took an hour because we now have the mini grant process, and I'm working on the proverbial dust that we see in Skype. But I think that we went through a lot of information. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or just unmute your mic, and you can do it that way. And I will open it up for questions now. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming in on chat, and I'm seeing some people heading out. So thank you very much for being here today. I will be posting this archive on the RFP page, so if you want to share it with anybody, it will be there as soon as I upload this. So I'll be putting that onto YouTube. Oh, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for being here. Everybody have a great rest of the day.